Good morning, boys and girls, and welcome once again to the southern wing of the Stink Bug Works. I don't have a whole lot new to show, but I would like to go over some ideas. You know, I kind of enjoy hanging out with you guys in the morning and sharing ideas. Big B was absolutely correct when he said, this is a thinking man's game. You essentially get an empty box, and your job is to take this empty box and to make it do something spectacular. And so, you know, there's a lot of thinking that goes into that. And so, here, let me give you one example of the kind of thinking you gotta consider. Now, when I made this steerable outdrive, you know, I constructed it so that this tab would go into this slot, and I did eventually drill a hole through it. But I also made this slotted screw here for attaching my strut tang. And what that would do over time is, because this is clamping down on the tang itself, this little bit of carbon fiber here at the end is going to move. And if you have it glued down to the cavitation plate, every time you tighten up that strut, because you're going to want that strut gluten tight, you know, you're going to want it tight. So in order to eliminate any problem with, you know, this being glued to the strut, I milled a couple of thousandths off of it so that it's not glued down to the strut. It's free to move. So there you go. And that's the only thing that'll fit in there is a piece of paper. But that was the idea, that when I'm clamping down on this little bit of carbon's going to move, and I don't want it cracking glue joints because it's just not good. So that was some of the thinking that went into that. If you recall yesterday, I was talking about hanging the motor from the motor mounts, and I still like that idea. But when I sat the motor down in the boat, I realized I didn't think about these tabs for the bolts that tighten the whole thing together, and they crash with the bottom of the hull, meaning I've got to raise the motor up higher to accommodate that. And believe it or not, that even though it's a quarter of an inch is a lot. So in this boat, I'm back to thinking this way. But I've revised my thinking a little bit. I'm still not going to use the end motor mounts, which are now in the box of motor mounts. What I'm going to do is pretty similar to what I had planned before, but instead of slots allowing this thing to slip into place, I'm going to precisely drill holes in the G10 rails that are now going to be very low and will make battery access easier. So I'm going to drill these precisely into the G10, and then to get the motor in and out, the process will be this. Loosen these screws, half a turn. Loosen this screw as much as necessary, and then just rotate the brackets out of the way. I've already tested it. It works. Because of the geometry of this, with the center of rotation being a 1/16 of an inch or 3/32 back from here, you know, if this were the exact size, but you can spread it apart enough that it works. It works. I've tested it. It works. Oh, motor couplers. Big B is having problems with, is it 3/16 inch shaft? If it's 3/16 inch shaft or 1/4 inch for that matter, get one of these Speedmaster couplers from Steve, and then these collets are readily available. They cost about $12, but they're precise. But these collets are available in every size up to about 1/4 inch. So I have a 3/16 on order. So Arcturus, they're good, but there's 3 blades crushing the cable, whereas the geometry of the way these crush and the number of jaws crushing, it's far less apt to tweak the end of the cable to crush it. So Speedmaster makes the bitchin' setup, and just get the collet of your appropriate size. It's an E11R collet. E11. And this is an E11R receptacle. So I'm thinking how to mount my servo. I want my servo at an angle because it's easier to get at all the screws, it's easier to mount it, and it offers a couple of easy ways to adjust the height of your push rod. Well, lo and behold, I'm cruising through eBay and I see these angled servo mounts. And I look at them and I go, man, they're expensive. They're like 15 or 20 bucks. But they looked like they would do the job. And I says, okay, well, I'll take a $20 gamble. I can risk 20 bucks. So I sent 20 bucks, and here's what I got. Check these out. These anodized purple, can you see them there? Anodized purple, and they have a threaded mount here, and 4, you can see them from the backside, 4 different spacings. And let me tell you, these were made for some wheeled vehicle, a car, a truck, a buggy, a crawler. I have no idea, but they were made for wheeled vehicles. But by screwing on a G10 foot, or let's just call it the mount, by gluing on this foot, or screwing on this foot, I can now position this in the boat wherever I want it. And by putting the arm here, I can get the push rod at an elevation which is pretty close to the middle of the transom, which is about where you're going to want this thing to exit. And I'll have to cut foam and find a place to put this in if necessary, if I want it off on this side. But you see, I can stick the servo way off to the side like that if I want. So I like these mounts, and I obviously have to shape these, but once I find its spot somewhere along this line, right about in here or back, that's where it's going to go. So again, I can't do anything until I physically hang hardware off there, and I take since my batteries are now fixed, I take my 2 big movable parts and start moving them around to see where the balance point goes. I guess the speed control is not that heavy compared to these, but I'd like to put the speed control up against here. It fits, and then I could run the cooling tube on the underside of here and just run a tube a metal tube up underneath here that you couldn't see, and at the last minute have it turn out here to the speed control. So it would be totally invisible, out of your way, everything, and the return would do the same thing. It would hide under the deck, go to the motor, exit the motor, and out. And that way, there would be no visible hoses other than a connection here, and connections to the motor. And they would just sort of emanate from the sides, from the non-trip area of the hull. So that's my thinking. You got to think at this game. You got to plan ahead. So Big B, you're right. It's a think a man's game. I guess that's why I liked it more than airplanes. Because after a while, we all had the answers to airplanes, and there really wasn't a whole lot more room to develop other than just fine-tuning everything. So this became a good area of challenge because everything's new. I don't know anybody that's built one of these, and I've only seen videos of them running. We shall see. Until then, boys and girls, jet out.